Uh, where does your story start?
Well, it depends on what you mean by my story. Are you talking about my time in business?
I mean, that's up to you to decide. That's what I think is really interesting about these interviews is sometimes you get someone who's like, "Oh, my story begins in college," or sometimes they're like, "Oh, my story begins when I started working for XYZ."
Yeah. Okay. So if I had to kind of write a story of when I felt like life started to happen, it would have been my senior year in high school. Because during that year, I thought that I was going to go to school and become a medical doctor, physician. And so I enjoyed high school, but really wanted to get into more of medicine. And so I did a detached program from my high school and I became an emergency medical technician in my high school year. And I thought that would be a really rad place to found my love of emergency medicine and medicine. And I fell in love with it. It was a ton of fun. I joined Health Occupation Students of America during that period and really took it seriously and really wanted to be one of the best EMTs. I'm a very competitive person. And with EMT, it's a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, competitive, light thing that they do, right? Somebody
Mhm.
flipped over a car and you're jumping out of the back of the ambulance, and it's all about beating time and death and nature. And you have a ton of adrenaline doing it. So I got really into it in this health occupation students thing. And they had competitions at a state level about different scenarios they would throw at you. And you'd have an EMT partner and you'd go to these competitions. And we were really damn good at it. So we actually ended up winning state. And that was not just our class, but like small colleges and others that had these EMT programs. And my friend and I won the state in the EMT. And so subsequently our school won state. We were invited to go to the nationals. We were runner up in nationals only because we feel like they cheated because it was held in Louisville, Kentucky, of all places.
Man.
And the overseeing body or the judging body of the EMT program were from Kentucky, and they chose the Kentucky team as first place over us. So
Well, home team advantage there, you think?
yeah, something's felt wrong because the state delegates, so our instructors had right to watch. They could witness the program as many as they wanted. So there was multiple rounds and we progressed through the rounds. And they would give you these really rad scenarios. And then you just go in and you would solve for those scenarios, right? There would be an accident, a dog bite, a medical, or whatever it was. And so they watched every later round. So when we got into like the finals, they watched them and us and felt like very clearly there was no question we outpaced them, we outtimed them, we did everything. But nonetheless, we ended up in second. And so that started to get me thinking about what do I want to do for the rest of my life. And I really thought that I wanted to be a physician. So I started university and I started a pre-med like program. I hadn't declared pre-med yet, but I started studying the general studies that would kind of lead me into that. So the biologies and chemistries and then decided I really hated those classes. So I loved the medical side, the practical side of medicine, but I hated the studious side of medicine.
The stem grinder,
Yeah, it was just like,
essentially.
what am I doing? You would get into like organic chemistry and you go, this isn't medicine. I mean, it was, but in my mind, it was medicine to me was patient care. It was
Mhm.
the things that I had to do to interact with the patient. And I thought I could go into surgery. And I was like, I'm not going to push any medicines in surgery. I'm going to cut somebody open and I'm going to fix them. And so I went through a year of that and started to rethink what I wanted to do. And wound up in a position, I think, not unlike yourself, kind of like, now what do I want to do with my life? That's all blown up. So I was still practicing some of the EMT stuff. I actually got a position as a very strange role under a medical doctor called the physician substitute at a plasmapheresis center.
What's a
It's just,
plasmapheresis center?
so they draw your blood, they spin out the plasma out of your blood, and
Mhm.
then mix your red blood cells back with saline and push the red blood cells back into your body. So people could give plasma like 2 or 3 times a week.
Okay.
And so a lot of homelessness do that because they get paid. You get paid like 40 back then. You got paid like $40 every time you took a draw. And so a lot of homeless people would come in, and that's how they would get $80 a week, because they kept themselves clean enough to donate plasma. We had to test it, and I was the guy that gave them their general physicals to make sure they were generally healthy enough to donate plasma. So everybody called me Doogie Howser. I don't know if you know the reference to that.
Neil
But
Patrick Harris's first show.
yes, I wore like a lab coat and everything, and I had my own office with exam tables. I was like this 19-year-old kid, and I was telling grown adults at the time whether or not I thought they were healthy enough. So I would check their throats for any infection or the ears for any infection, because if anybody had an infection, we didn't want them to donate because it would just drive the infection worse and it might taint the plasma. So I was just kind of basically taking blood pressure and checking for any visual signs of infection and or fever, things like that. So I learned how to palpate for various inflammation and infections, and would check just like you would do when you would go to a doctor. And I was this young kid that went in and did that. But I knew it wasn't a career. So I did that while I was going to school. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I just sort of stuck in this. I thought I was going to be a physician. I really hate those classes. The thought of 8 years of likeness to those classes didn't sound fun. 4 years of undergraduate in kind of scientific related fields, and then 4 years in medical school, and then likely 2 more years of residency. And the residency didn't scare me because that was the practical application. But I was lost, trying to figure out now what. So in my kind of being lost, I decided to do something that a lot of kids do here in Utah growing up in the Mormon community. And I was dating my now wife at the time, who was encouraging me to, well, if you're not going to do school and you need a little bit of a break and you don't feel like you know what you're going to do with your career, maybe you should go on a LDS mission. So I did. So I dropped everything I was doing. I dropped out of school and left my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and left for 2 years. And that's where I went to Connecticut. So it was a combination of Connecticut and Rhode Island. It was the Hartford mission, and that covered all the way over to the borders of Massachusetts. So, and the only part of Rhode Island it didn't cover was the part with all the mansions in it, Newport. But it did cover this little small area of Massachusetts called Seekonk, Massachusetts. And so went to Provo, Utah, of all places, and learned far more about our religion than I had any concept or understanding of, and learned how to sell that religion is really what you did in the MTC. So I was an English speaker, meaning I was called to speak English and not another language, which is still one of the most regrettable parts of having done that. And not getting a very firm grasp of the language was really disappointing. But you go and you learn for 3 weeks how to sell the church and sell the gospel. And if you're a language speaker, you would actually go for 2 months, and they would teach you the language in the MTC, and then you go out and really dive in headfirst into whatever native tongue country you were going to. But I got the boring call and went back east and spoke English. But really what happened, Daniel, that was a time when I went, I'm actually pretty good at selling stuff. And if you can sell Jesus successfully,
Sell anything.
you can almost sell anything. And if you can sell Jesus in a highly Catholic environment, you can really prove success. And I had a good time selling Jesus. It was a ton of fun, and the principles that I still use today in business were taught to me in that mission. All about the importance of finding people to investigate. So your finding pool, and then the teaching pool, those people that you're trying to get to commit, and then the commitment pool, and then the ultimate coup de grace, closed one of that was the baptism.
Mm-hmm.
And we were taught these really pretty simple business principles that I've never let go of.
The perfect prospect profile.
It really, well, you profiled them, yes. Individuals that were looking for something, right? They felt a little bit lost. They needed deity. They felt like they were in the wrong institution. They knew there was a higher power, but they didn't feel right in the place which they were participating. So yeah, we had people that we would profile, but we would talk to everybody seeking that profile.
Mm-hmm.
And then the goal was to get them interested in enough to take discussions. So it's very similar to a sales cycle, right? You're an individual that's looking for something. Our goal is to get you interested in our something
Mm-hmm.
that you might be looking for, and then to take you through the exercises of understanding what that thing is that I am pitching. And so I learned a lot about the importance of having all of these cascading buckets always full. So I always had my prospecting pool as a missionary. And we use these archaic ways of tracking that, right? They're just old CRMs that were basically on paper. And we would track, when did we contact them last? When did we visit them last? What lesson are we on if they're taking the lessons? What commitments have they made, and when's their date of baptism, that close date, right?
Mm-hmm.
I learned these really cool principles, and I had a couple of really fun mission companions, because when you're out there, you do this with another person. You live with them full time. And we were kind of, all of my companions and I through that 2 years were mutually invested in winning. Like, to us, it was like, we got to do it. We believed at the time we were winning for God, but I think being detached from that now 25 years, 26 years, I just love winning, right? So I came home from that experience with others in and around the church. And in Utah, that's 65% of people that live in the state are in or very close to in. They understand that you learn these principles. And so I came home and I went back to school, but I also started selling for a cabinet shop, just a little tiny shop that was selling cabinets. And he happened to have a window line that he said, "Oh, I'd like you to help me sell as a reseller this window line." It happened to be Milgard Windows. So I was like, sure, I'll give it a go. And I still remember when I thought I had just hit a home run. And he said, cool, I'll give you an office in the shop. It's a brand new shop. I'll pay you $36,000 a year as a base salary, $3,000 a month, and I'll give you a cellular phone. And back then, that was when cellular phones were charged by the minute.
It was a brick.
It was a little smaller than that. They had gotten a little smaller by then. This is back in 98. So they were smaller, and the flip phones and stuff were starting to come out, but they were just analog phones.
Mm-hmm.
And I just employed those factors that I'd learned on my mission. Like, okay, I got to fill my first pool. I got to find people. And I would literally subscribe to mailers, because the internet was a brand new thing and it was all still dial up. And there wasn't a lot of sites to help you get information or to find prospects or profile individuals. It was literally, I would get these blue mailers, we call them, every week. And it would have permits pulled for that week across northern Utah. So for homes, for commercial buildings, and when you pull a permit, you have to put the contractor, or you could be a contractor owner and you have to put your name and a phone number. I just literally started cold calling. And so I started filling that bucket up with people. I was like, look, I know you're building a home. I know you're building a commercial property. I know you're going to need cabinets and windows, and I sell those. Can I tell you about the ones I sell? And it took off. Like, we had a ton of success. He pay me a commission. He didn't pay me a lot. It was like 10% or something of the margin of the deal. So if I made $2,000 in the deal, he would give me 200 additional bucks to my base salary. And he paid for my fuel and gave me a truck allowance and stuff like that back then, so I could run around to these job sites. Because you didn't have the web, you didn't have ways of people coming in, and there was no such thing as an inbound lead. Back then, if you had an inbound lead, they walked in your store. So I filled those buckets up, and I just filled them long and started closing and winning deals. And the really fortuitous thing for me while we were going through that was I happened to catch a guy named Gail Stott, and he owned a company, a steel company here in Utah called Stott Steel that had failed. But Gail was still worth a ton of money. And he had hired a general contractor, a guy named Randy Krantz, that was helping him remodel this awesome house up in the Olympus Cove, which is the hillside above Salt. And I supplied all of the windows for his house, then was due to supply his cabinetry as well. And Gail didn't pay me. And he ran short of money, and I would get so much pressure from the small business owner, like, that's a $35,000 window package. I don't have the money to pay the bill to Milgard. You got to go figure out how to get the money. And so Gail would take my call. He was a decent guy. And finally he said, why don't you come up to the house? I'll introduce you to this guy named Randy. He's my finance guy. And so I got introduced to Randy, and we became pretty fast friends. Ultimately, I got paid on the deal. And then I did all of Randy's work. He became like my number one contractor. Like, he was just like, you're my guy. You do all my windows and cabinets and everything I did. And he was building multi-million-dollar houses. And he owned a mortgage company. And we became friends to the point to where he was like, why are you selling for another guy? Let's set up our own business together. So we did. And we grew that business to a good sized company. Our largest year, we probably did about 20 million bucks in a year. And I ended up expanding from that to getting a contractor's license and doing some cool stuff with that. So I finished the associate's component of school and dropped out of school at that time and just focused on the business. And we built it to where we had a really solid reputation and a really nice business and income. And we invested in stuff and bought stuff and got in with UDOT and did some really neat things with the land that they had and built apartment buildings and just had a grand old time until 2008 hit. 2008 hit, everything came unwound really fast in the industries that we were in. So ultimately, long story short, I sold all the assets of that business. We had small track hose, we had skid steers, we had scaffolding, we were running framing crews and finished carpentry crews, and sold all the equipment to those guys so they could do it on their own. And I jumped out the window, closed that business down, and went back to school.
Where'd you go back to school?
I went back to the University of Utah. And then I thought, we had made some money during that time. So I thought, oh, maybe I can go live my medical dream now, and I'll just do something that's not as grounded in science, but more the practical application of medicine. And I thought athletic training would be really cool. So I went back to school to become an athletic trainer, and then decided the athletic training pays nothing. So I still just went to school, and I went to business school, undergraduate school, and finished that, and was like, okay, I'm kind of back in the business area, and decided maybe I'll just call a couple buddies and see what they're doing. So I ended up in a recruiting firm called Robert Half International and became a division director there, selling again. This time we were selling candidates to needy employers. And that story went from getting kind of the same thing, became really good friends with a really fun organization called Twin Lab. Twin Lab's president asked me to come over and to help him with project management because he found out that I was a contractor. And he said, well, that's where project management started. That's like the purest form of project management. Come over here and run a project management office for me at my company. It was $120 million a year. It made vitamins, minerals, and supplements and sports nutrition, like proteins and whey powders. And while I was there, I started to see that some technology could help me in this. And got the nod to spend some money on technology. So I bought a technology for our project management office to control all of the things that we were going to do. It was called AtTask at the time. Successfully implemented that and rolled it out throughout the company, made some big wins, took on some really large deals with Walmart. And it was a ton of fun. We took that company public. I was on the executive team to help take that public. In fact, you can see the share
placards,
right side right there, that globe. That's my share issuance certificate of a public company that was granted to me. I still own them. They're still public. They're still in business. They're just not worth very much money. We opened at about $1.25 a share, and I had a 6-month hold on my shares. I had 3.5 million shares. So I thought, oh, that could be pretty good. They're probably worth $100,000 now. So they're just framed and sitting up there because I won't do anything with them. They decided to move that company to St. Petersburg, Florida. I said, no way. My family's here in Utah. I'm not going to St. Pete. And so I called up this company AtTask, that was the software that I implemented, and said, look, I love your software. Feel like I could do really well in that arena. And they said, do you know how to implement it? I said, well, you implemented it for me. And they said, do you lead people? I said, I have led people. And I told them kind of the backstory I just shared with you. They said, sure, come over. And they hired me as a consulting practice manager at AtTask. And that's how I got into software full time. So that was now 2012. So about 11 years ago, I got into software. And until just recently, I've been in the project management software space. Did some awesome stuff at AtTask. We converted it and created a new segment called Marketing Work Management that nobody had ever invented. And we just pivoted all our focus on managing marketers' work, doing things that marketing teams needed, and then implementing that into tools. And we just made stuff up. Nobody had understood the mechanisms of customer success. It was basically you sell and you give them support. And we started to jump on this bandwagon, this idea of, well, what about keeping them happy long term? And what are some of the things that we could do with that? And what can we employ to implement them, but also make them feel the love every single year through their renewal cycles? We were given a lot of license. When I say we, one of my best friends joined the company, got him hired. And he and I did it together, late nights. We did big brown paper exercises where we would take big rolls of the
butcher paper.
Yeah. And we put it all over the walls, and we'd walk around the company and we would ask everybody, can you tell us the process of the customer? And we got all of these, everybody around this company, and we would pin every single input up on this brown paper. We took 2 floors of our building, and ultimately the CEO was like, what is this crap all over the walls? He got invested in it and then supported us to developing a customer journey map, which I'm a huge believer in now of identifying and practicing. And we were able to influence that company to savings of tens of millions of dollars a year just from duplicating efforts from different departments that were non-visible to other departments, and to putting a singular customer journey expectation in front of the company. As a result, we were both promoted. Keyedin took a position to oversee all of the consultancy efforts for the company, and I took a position, peer position, to help evangelize that to the partner ecosystem we were growing with the company at the time. And we just continued to evangelize that to where it was fully adopted at Workfront. And we helped to take Workfront's net renewal, which means customers add a value. The following year of their sign up, what's the value of that customer again? So losses plus gains equals what? We were running at about a net 102. We've implemented these programs and hammered away at them for a couple of years. And by the time we started the second year, we were running an average net of 126. So stuff
bump it up.
Yeah, so the stuff worked, and we were like, cool. We played it forward, and then interestingly, the world's a strange place with how technology works. Other people found out that it worked for Workfront, and they recruited us. So he went to Avanti, and I went to this little old company called Keyedin that was really struggling for these same aspects. They gave me a big raise and said, can you come help us influence that here? We hear you're really good at it. And for 7 years at Keyedin, with one sabbatical, I'll come back to that. But for 7 years at Keyedin, I just kind of ran the same programs, met really great people that subscribed to it. The likes of your dad, who's very much a subscriber to customer experience and customer success and the importance of measuring your customers and always understanding their heat scores and always understanding their happiness scores and what you have to do to ensure that they understand that there's going to be times where you're going to be super excited and there's going to be times when you're super upset, but we know when those times are, so expect it. And we were able to kind of set cadence and take a really fledgling company that was trying to go from an on-prem world to a SaaS world, got it to the SaaS world, but then it was, oh shoot, we only have $700,000 a year in recurring revenue. What do we do? So we just employed these practices into our sales methodologies. And we took the company to about 18 million a year in revenue and just sold it 5 months ago for a 12.5x multiple. So we took it from a 3-year customer life value to about a 12-year because we created happy customers. And we were running about mid 20th percentile in growth. So nothing Herculean, nothing crazy. It's a pretty crowded space. The space was only growing about 7% a year. So we were taking market share from other like businesses. We were proud of what we did, and somebody thought it was really valuable. So through all of that, lots of lessons to learn about. Number one, Daniel, I think it was craziest to me that is, I think I understand it more now, but I came from a business world of profit margin was your value. You had to make money against whatever goods and services you're offering to have value in the company and to be able to pay people, because that was the margin you paid people for. That was the margin you paid your bills with. To this really interesting world of, we called it funny money when we learned about it at first. It was like, wait a minute, we're losing 7 times the amount that it costs us to get a customer. How's that even possible? And it was all about the world of valuations and private equity and venture capital that just opened my eyes wide to the world isn't always about profitability on a line. It's about value of a company.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that evolve as well, which has been really fun, to where no matter what you did as a company, if you grew, people would give you money, and growing at all costs, literally. When we converted Attest to Workfront, our CAC, customer acquisition cost, was 7 times the value of the land. So $7 for every $1 we brought in. And I was like, this is crazy. So if we don't grow them and we just hold that value, it's going to take us 7 years to get our money back, just to get it back. Yet the valuations of Workfront were 20 times what our annual recurring revenue was.
Huh.
So I got involved with a lot of private equity. I got a lot of venture capital. I did some of that at Workfront on a lighter scale. And then at Keyedin on a heavier scale when we did a Series B round. And I said I would come back to a little element of my Keyedin journey. For 9 months during that 7 years, I left Keyedin and went to another business, a unicorn startup that everybody said was the cat's meow, and it really was. It had all the buzz. Money was flowing everywhere from VC and PE. Everybody wanted to attack on it. They made promises that there was no way they could ever keep, but we all bought into it. And so I left Keyedin, which, as a side note, I wouldn't have. I would have stayed at Keyedin had we kept the course of what it was was working. But we had a CEO that liked to chase different opportunities, and she chased the wrong opportunity that the rest of us couldn't support. So I finally just said, look, I can't be part of that. I'm going to go do this other thing. And I went to a company called ClickUp. And during that 9 months, one of the most beneficial experiences that I had was, and I don't regret going at all for 2 reasons. The first is the first thing that they did when I came in is they said, we've got this awesome valuation. If you can help us clean up our sticky factors, help us make sure that we can plug the leaky bucket of churn and get a valuation, we can go raise money, because we'd raised very little money. So we did. We employed the same practices. We were able to take a 60% churn rate down into the mid-30s. So it was still pretty churny, but it was also a product-led growth motion.
So when you said sticky factor, does that mean kind of making sure ARR stays?
Yeah, they're not going to leave us.
Okay.
And the PLG motion there was a month-to-month motion. So there was very little annual contracts because it was all product-led growth through a website that said, you like what you see, sign up, $5 a month for a user, right? And so that user may sign up, use the project tool for a month, and then churn out the next month because they don't have a project. Then sign up 4 months later and do the cycle all over again, which is a train wreck for a business because it doesn't show that we have factors that keep the customer engaged in the product. So we improved that. We gave them reasons to stick around. So the small players, we gave them reasons to stick around through the product itself. And then we put in motion enterprise plays, and we just did the right thing. We turned enough of the knobs at the right time that we took it from $1 billion valuation to a $4 billion valuation. And to be honest and fair, a lot of that was just natural tailwinds at the time, right?
This is what year?
This was just after COVID kicked up. So 2020, mid 2020 is when I left Keyedin and went to ClickUp. And so there was a lot of tailwinds, especially in, products that could bring people together, bring workforces together remotely. We were one of those, right? You had an interface that you could chat on. You had an interface that you could see progress and project work, and you could interface with it. And so we had a lot of tailwind. But nonetheless, I got to take part in raising $400 million against this valuation of $4 billion, which at the time was a 98 times valuation. And I am betting that you and your classmates and all the folks that are your age will never see that kind of valuation on a company ever again.
The 2020 to like 2022 money flow it's something that's not going to happen for another 200 years.
Yeah, it was almost irresponsible. First of all, there were so many people that thought that PE and VC couldn't lose that they gave them money unlimited. But second of all, that PE and VC thought that there was any rational rhyme or reason why you would give somebody 100 times their revenue and value at any given time. Again, going back to that Workfront experience, we sat there and said, you're going to pay we're going to pay 7 years of money to get one. These guys were saying, we'll give you 100 years of money for one, which just means we believe that you're going to grow it enough to bring it down into rational acquisition costs. And we believe that you're going to have these customers that are going to stick around above that rational acquisition cost that's far greater than the $4 billion in value that we'll assign to this. And the crazy thing is, Daniel, we also did that deal for 12% of the business. So that's all they got. So the Zeb Evans, who was the founder and CEO, maintained control of the company after raising that much money.
Dang.
And he took 8 figures. A couple of his other founding buddies took 8 figures off the top with that deal. So they did the 400 million. We got all of that, but then there's always a tail in those deal types where they'll say, do you want to sell us some of your equity at the same value? So he did, right? He sold them like 3% and took 35 million or something like that. And so he pulled it off the top, and a couple of his other founders pulled it off the top. These are all young guys. Zeb was 33 and the other guys were under 30. So they got fat, dumb, and happy early in the game. We got it done, and then I started getting phone calls from the board and the chairman of the board from Keyedin saying, we screwed up, come back. And so life is a funny thing when you allow it to play out. And one of the things that I would tell people in my story is just let life play out. As bad as you think it might be, there's a good turner just up the corner, just up the bend, just up the street. Because when you look at it, and you even look at the click-up period to Keyedin, it forced other individuals to question what they were doing. I was able to come back and say, I will come back, but under condition. And I made them set targets for those conditions and said, so if we can achieve these targets, this is what I'll get, this is what you'll get, and everybody approves. And they all said yes. So we sold Keyedin for a hefty sum, deep into 9 figures. And we got paid. The board is happy. The board was dissolved. All of those board members and investors are thrilled and want to work with me again. And as tough as it seems when you're in the trenches, sometimes there's pretty unique opportunities that can present themselves. I didn't know what I wanted to do after I wasn't going to be an EMT. And I just let life go. I just said, okay, I'll just trust. And I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And I just happened to land in a mission that taught me how to sell. I took that chance and said, okay, cool. Taught me how to sell. So I got home and happened to get asked by a guy to come and sell for him, and it worked. And because I just said, trust the process of what you know works in selling, I found a guy that became a business partner to me for 12 years. And we made good money. We built a great business. We employed hundreds of people for years and years and years on end. And even in the hardest of times, 2008 and 2009, when most people thought everything is hopeless, and I was one of those, wondering, I don't know what I'm going to do. Everything that I've built, everything that I've gone to is being taken away. There's this huge mortgage crisis. Nobody can actually borrow money for me to build them a home. Every inventories are crazy and foreclosures are everywhere. So if somebody's going to buy a home, they're going to buy it on foreclosure at a 50% discount. And there just wasn't any business to be had. And I just said, I'll just keep pressing forward with life. And I enjoyed my wife and kids. I enjoyed time. We were able to buy a home in Southern Utah. We enjoyed time there. I got into running and cycling and ultimately into triathlon. I got to become an Ironman during that period of my life. I made some of the tightest friendships that I've ever made because we weren't working very much, but we just got up every day and we said, though we're not working because the economy's crap and we're all wondering what to do, let's just do something we can get good at. And we got good at biking. We got good at running. And we put it all together and we became pretty good triathletes. And we just stayed the course. We just let life continue, and we just kept putting a foot in front of the other. We never gave up. And lots of stuff kind of fell into play, and it has since then, right? We sold Keyedin. I had the option to stay there as an executive. But I had other options from friends that I have made along this journey to join them. And I'm working with a friend right now, putting a go-to-market motion in place. I met your dad, who's become one of my closest friends and confidants. And he and I we've always got each other, and we'll make sure that our families are mutually taken care of. I met George and Lori Klaus. I met people like Simon Fielding and Matt Muldoon and Kevin Hurley, and a guy that was a relationship through my wife's best friend became my best friend, and we spent late nights together at Workfront. He's now the chief operating officer at LiveView Technologies, which is one of the fastest growing tech companies in the US. And nobody could have scripted this. But the thing that we did is we never gave up, and we just kept plowing forward. So that's my story to date, right? During all that time, Daniel, I made a family with my wife. We bought our first home. We upgraded that and built the home that we live in, which when we built this home, we were 26 and 25. And people couldn't believe that we were building a home on the hill. It's worth a couple $1,000,000. And we still live here, and we bought a home in southern Utah. And we have a home now up in Garden City. We do fun things with our kids. We were able to buy our homes with cash or cash-like. We've paid for all of our cars. We've put our kids through college. And it doesn't come easy. None of it's been easy. But I will say it's been worth it.
That leads to my my kind of second question for this interview, which is, how do you want your story to end?
So just like the other parts of my life, I'm uncertain, but I'll be okay with however it does. But if I had to say the thing that I'd like to do that seems to resonate the most with me, but I also say never count on it, never say never, and never have an expectation above reality. And reality is just today. Tomorrow doesn't exist. It's only today when it becomes that. But for me, it would be, I'd like to build a business taking all the knowledge that we have gathered with the right individuals that understand the value of all of the principles that have shown to work in technology for the last 12 years. Build that to just a bit more than lifestyle and enjoy that as long as we want to. Sell it for enough money to call it a day. And calling it a day for me is, I'd like to golf a couple of times a week, but I still want to work. But working for me, the ideal would be to join other startups and other organizations with similar challenges and share the details of the experiences that I've just shared with you. I shared with you 25 years and 30 minutes. This is the best interview to date, not to just blow smoke up your ass, but that was a really, really good story. Good.
So thank you for that. I figured I have you for a couple more minutes. So could I ask a couple more questions?
Sure.
So what would you say is your proudest failure?
Seeing my business fail. That's a big, messy failure. But I'm proud. The reason that I'm proud of it is I picked myself up and got on with it. We had a $20 million business going into 2008, and it was as large as it could have been going into 2008. We had projects all over the valley and up in Park City, and I just thought there's no way we can lose, and we lost. And
what'd you learn from that?
I learned that you don't ever have the amount of control that you think you have, and there's no such thing as total control. And I think that even big guys like Elon Musk has learned that, right? he got pretty used to just winning and winning and winning again, put $42 billion in play. He's going to lose it all. If that
Twitter's
platform
worth
is
what,
down in 3 years,
3%?
that's terrible.
Yeah, it's bit of a disaster.
Yeah.
Um,
So I just I learned from that. No, you didn't have all the control. There's so many outlying considerations that you don't have any control over. And we all have them, regardless of the business that we're in, regardless of the life we're trying to lead. There are things that are out of our control. And so the reason that that's my proudest failure is for those years of recovery, trying to figure out what to do next, while I was still dealing with the fallout of that loss of that business, I learned life goes on. And life can be just as good or better than it was before. Just put another foot in front of the one you had. And it's worked out okay. So that perspective is one of the most meaningful perspectives that I can have in my life now, because I felt like I was at the bottom of the bottom, the lowest of the low. I felt like my family was in jeopardy. I felt like my house was in jeopardy. And all of that translates to I felt like my life was in jeopardy. It felt out of control. And I just got up every day and I found something that interested me and I made myself do it.
there's no such thing as total control. That's one of those ones where each time one of these interviews happen, something just gets etched into the mind for forever. Um, that's kind of what I took from this one. So I'm gonna stop the recording right here, and thank you so much for your time and meeting with me.